A traffic cop raises their hand and you stop mid-stride. A doctor in a white coat speaks and you believe they're personally texting with God. A billionaire wears a hoodie and you think they're just like you. What if these reactions were programmed by people who figured out that humans are suckers for shiny fabric? Don't worry, no reptilians were harmed in the making of this theory. Buckle up, because we're about to crash this party. Let's start with history's first influencers, kings and queens, except these influencers could legally execute people for unfollowing them. For most of human history, people bowed down to genetic accidents whose only qualification was not declaring war on their own feet. Those inbred aristocrats stumbled upon the ultimate life hack. If you dress like a god, people's brains will short-circuit and treat you like one. Take King Louis XIV, the Sun King who turned getting dressed into a spectator sport. This guy was 5 feet 4 inches. A tiny son, it seems. So he invented high heels for men. But wait, it gets better. Louis wore heels with tiny battle scenes painted on the soles. Every step literally trampled his enemies in artwork nobody could see. Renaissance artists were getting commissioned for an audience of 0. His royal robes weighed 50 pounds of gold and jewels. That's like wearing a medium-sized dog as a cape. The Romans took this even further. They created sumptuary laws, fashion police with execution powers. Wearing imperial purple could get you dramatically executed. We're talking about a colour that required crushing 12,000 sea snails per garment. Every purple robe was basically a wearable aquatic massacre. Emperor Theodosius proclaimed, "Those who violate this law shall suffer the punishment of death." Possibly the most intense fashion review in human history. The colour hierarchy was beautifully insane. Peasants got 1 colour, soldiers got 2, officers got 3, and royals could rock a full 7-colour rainbow, while everyone else got executed for wearing the wrong socks. Emperor Aurelian banned men from wearing shoes in red, yellow, green or white. Only the emperor could wear red or purple shoes. Sorry, Prince. The Chinese emperors took this even further with dragon robes. Only the emperor could wear 5-clawed dragons while everyone else got 4 claws or fewer. They turned the number of embroidered claws into a literal life or death fashion hierarchy. But my favourite master of costume psychology, Gandhi, the man who destroyed an empire by showing up to fights wearing the anti-uniform uniform. When he was a young London lawyer, he dressed like the most proper English gentleman possible. Here's the galaxy brain move. When he returned to India, he stripped down to simple homespun cloth and became the visual opposite of British power. Every photograph of Gandhi in his white dhoti standing next to fancy British officials made the colonisers look like overdressed bullies, picking on the world's most enlightened grandfather. The British Empire was so threatened by Gandhi's wardrobe that they made homespun cloth illegal. Humble cotton versus imperial silk, and cotton won. Here's what Gandhi understood that took me years to figure out. The person who controls the visual narrative controls the conversation before it even starts. But what happens when costume psychology goes completely off the rails? Let's find out right now. Now let's talk about humans taking costume psychology to its completely unhinged extreme. Meet the Viking berserkers, warriors who literally believed they became the animals they wore. Method acting on steroids, these magnificent psychopaths would don bear and wolf pelts and enter what psychiatrists call a transitory dissociative state, basically Black Friday shopping energy. A Byzantine emperor described warriors dancing in animal skins before battle, working themselves into such a frenzy they'd bite their shields and fight with supernatural strength. Here's the kicker, berserkers were so effective they were outlawed by the 11th century. They were too violent for Vikings. Vikings! Modern science proves this enclothed cognition is real. Scientists gave people identical white coats. Half were told it was a doctor's coat, half a painter's coat. The doctors immediately scored higher on attention tests, while the painters showed no improvement. This explains why putting on a suit makes you feel powerful, and a mumbling suburban dad can become the Prince of Darkness. The Stanford prison experiment and Milgram's obedience studies proved that uniforms change everything. College students randomly assigned to play prison guards became abusive authoritarians within hours. just from wearing guard uniforms in a fake prison. Meanwhile, ordinary people wearing lab coats convinced strangers to deliver painful electric shocks to innocent victims because the lab coat made them feel like scientific authorities who must be obeyed. Plot twist about those medical white coats. When doctors wear regular clothes, they actually listen to patients more carefully and make fewer mistakes. The white coat doesn't make them smarter, it makes them feel so important they stop paying attention. Doctors succumbing to the placebo effect. But just how far will people go for the perfect authority costume? Time to see just how extreme it gets. If you think royal robes were expensive, wait until you hear about the Aztecs and their completely unhinged feather addiction. The Aztecs considered feathers more valuable than gold. The most prized feathers came from Quetzal birds, and here's where it gets ridiculous. Each male Quetzal grows only a few of those shimmering, impossibly long tail plumes, rare, delicate, and maddeningly hard to get. So to outfit one emperor, they organised what was essentially a massive bird butt heist. They had to catch wild Quetzals, gently pluck their tail feathers, then release them because Quetzals died in captivity. How thoughtful of them. Montezuma's famous headdress contained 12,000 feathers, suspiciously round number for hand counting. This thing was 6 feet wide but weighed only 2 pounds, a wearable cloud of intimidation. When Montezuma wore this, he looked like a god. Here's my favourite part. Aztec featherworkers had their own god named Coyotlinauhua, he who is disguised as a wolf. They worshipped a deity of costume design whose whole brand was also dressing up as animals. When Spanish conquistadors first encountered an Aztec emperor in full feather regalia, their brains experienced a collective blue screen of death. These guys in metal armour suddenly faced someone who had clearly defeated subtlety in single combat. This moment perfectly illustrates how costume psychology works across cultures. Even when you don't understand the specific symbols, your brain recognises this person has access to resources and systems beyond my comprehension. The Japanese samurai looked at the authority costume game and said, "You know what this needs? More nightmare fuel." These mad lads figured out that the best way to win a sword fight was making your opponent question getting out of bed that morning. They created the Menpo, facial armour designed to look like literal nightmares. Demon faces with fangs, wrinkled skin, and expressions that would sell millions as Snapchat filters. Here's where it gets psychologically twisted. It wasn't just about terrifying enemies. When you strap a demon face to your face and look in a mirror, something disturbing happens to your brain. You think, I do look like an unstoppable supernatural killing machine. Maybe I should start acting like one. Samurai armour was basically a mobile noise machine designed to announce your arrival. All those metal plates made deliberate clattering sounds, a percussion section that learned to walk and developed homicidal tendencies. The psychological warfare was so effective that enemies sometimes ran before fighting started. Honestly, the most efficient military strategy ever developed. My favourite part is how magnificently extra they were about colour coordination. Red meant life force, white meant pure will, and black meant absolute authority. One complete suit used up to 300 metres of silk cord, enough to stretch across 3 football fields. Another suspiciously round number for people without the metric system. The samurai understood what modern brand managers charge millions to figure out. Every detail sends a message, and when you're literally wearing your reputation into battle, there's no such thing as good enough. But what happens when this kind of precise messaging reaches the modern world? What if religious leaders use the exact same strategy to broadcast their entire philosophy? Here's how they do it. But before we find out, let's pause for just a breath. We release weekly videos exploring the timeless mechanics of power, from ancient empires to the instincts that still trigger fear, loyalty, and desire. We follow the architects of control, the performers of ritual, the legends of will. Some are icons, some you've never heard of, all shape the world you live in, if you like focused storytelling. Historical insight and a wink of visual irony. Subscribe and join us as we decode the power playbook one story at a time. Here's a modern example of sophisticated clothing psychology, the Vatican Fashion Wars between two popes with completely opposite inaugural messages. When Pope Benedict XVI was inaugurated in 2005, he chose the most elaborate traditional papal vestments possible. Red mozzetta, gold vestments, ceremonial mitre, red leather papal shoes. The full "I'm bringing back classic Catholic majesty" ensemble. Then in 2013, Pope Francis appeared in the simplest papal attire possible. Simplest white cassock possible, plain black shoes, simple iron cross instead of ornate gold. His message was equally clear: I'm here to serve the poor. Same institution, same role, completely opposite psychological messaging through clothing that communicated entire theological positions without a single spoken word. Here's the brilliant part. Every news anchor on earth instantly read both messages correctly without understanding Old Latin. You could probably predict each pope's entire governance approach just by looking at their sock choices. This demonstrates something crucial about costume psychology in the modern world. When everyone understands the visual language, your clothing choices become your first statement before you say a single word. But here's the real question. If papal clothing choices can broadcast entire philosophies to billions of people, what are your daily outfit choices broadcasting about you? Time to find out. But here's where this gets personal. Every day you navigate this phenomenon that shapes human interaction. From school dress codes to job interviews, we've been trained to accept that fabric choices determine worthiness. Look, I'm not saying you should show up to a job interview dressed like Radagast the Brown, with birds nesting in your hair. There are practical reasons to dress appropriately, but there's a difference between dressing professionally and letting the role erase who you are. The fascinating part is this economic paradox. Your ability to afford expensive professional clothes determines whether you're allowed to get a job that pays enough to afford expensive professional clothes. You trust airplane pilots to not turn you into expensive confetti based entirely on a costume with little wings on it. You let surgeons cut you open because they're wearing scrubs. You accept life-altering legal decisions from people in fancy bathrobes. But what if I told you the most powerful people today have cracked the code? What if they've figured out how to reverse this entire psychology? Time to see their trick. Today, the costume game has gotten so sophisticated, it would make our tiny Sun King weep with envy. Modern billionaires discovered what medieval royalty never figured out. Sometimes the ultimate power move is looking like you have no power at all. Mark Zuckerberg perfected costume switching, showing up to Congress in perfectly tailored suits, then returning to his daily uniform of grey t-shirts. That cost more per piece than most people's monthly rent. Steve Jobs perfected this psychological camouflage by hiring Issey Miyake, Sony's uniform designer, to create his non-executive look. The simple turtleneck made him instantly recognisable and more memorable than any CEO in a suit. It's the ultimate magic trick. While we expect power to look formal, the most influential people dress like they're going to Starbucks. But what connects these hoodie-wearing billionaires to ancient emperors in golden robes? What's the deeper pattern that runs through all of human history? Time to pull back the curtain. So here's the big reveal. Authority is just people. Wearing the right costumes, at the right times, in the right places, remove the crown and the king becomes someone who inherited a job. Smart maybe, but not divinely appointed. Take off the police uniform and you've got a human who knows about law enforcement, but isn't automatically an expert on every situation. Strip away the business suit and the CEO is someone good at business, but not necessarily a genius about everything they confidently opine on. Even those authoritative courtroom wigs that make judges look like they have a direct line to justice. They exist partly because King Louis XIV was going bald from syphilis 400 years ago and started a fashion trend to hide his royal hair loss situation. Understanding the game gives you power to choose how to play it. You can put on a suit for that important meeting, while knowing it's psychological armour you're wearing to navigate social expectations, not a magical transformation into a more worthy human being. You can respond to legitimate authority while recognising that your brain's automatic deference is being triggered by costume design, not necessarily competence or qualification beyond owns the right hat. The real power move, treating people like human beings instead of like their outfits, apparently a revolutionary concept that could change the world if enough people tried it. Judge by actions, not accessories, respect character, not clothing, and trust competence, not wardrobe. The uniform only has power if you give it power unconsciously, but consciousness, that's the most powerful uniform of all, and it looks great on everyone, never goes out of style, and nobody can take it away from you, no matter how shiny their badge. So the next time someone in a uniform gives you an instruction, you'll have that split second of choice, respond to the costume or respond to the person wearing it. That moment of conscious choice, that's where your actual power lives. And hey, if you ever become a billionaire, maybe wear an actual crown to your next congressional hearing, because if we're all in a costume party anyway, we might as well have some fun with it. Now it's your turn. What have you worn to hide or to stand out? When did clothing give you power, and when did it take it away?